Hello team, welcome back to another tutorial. Greetings for the day. We are looking at ISTQB Foundation examination series. So here is another tutorial on chapter 2 where we'll be looking into the next topic, that's 2.3, the test types. So the test types, basically we'll be elaborating more on what is like testing all about and how testing are being classified, what is static testing, what's dynamic testing, and under that we'll be looking into more of like how white box testing is classified, and further, or how does it differ from the black box testing techniques. Also, to a certain extent, we'll be looking into the functional and non-functional levels of testing and differentiating between them, and also elaborating more on the retesting and regression testing, which we just kicked off in chapter 1 with a brief understanding of the same. So we'll be elaborating in more better detail understanding here in the same section, that's test types. So let's move into the topic, and very first thing what we need to get started with before understanding anything else is the classification of testing. So it's very common for me when I conduct sessions and I ask people that how do you think software testing is classified, and what are the different types of testing. Then I come up, or I see most of the people come up with an answer stating that it is either manual or automation, or maybe some of them say that white box and black box. Not today. Make sure that today you understand the right definition or the classification between them. Software testing is basically classified into static testing and dynamic testing, where when you talk about static testing, obviously static, the word itself represents that you do not have any kind of execution involved. When you say static, that means that doesn't work. So doesn't work in the sense that should not be right words to be used at this point of time, because we will be evaluating certain set of documentations which are being created at an early stage. So talking from the principle of early testing, testers are involved at a very early stage to contribute by reviewing the documents and finding potential defects as a part of it. So it basically helps again that when you try to review a document, it helps you to find defects at an early stage before this document can be used for further processing of writing the codes, or maybe preparation of the test cases and so on. So reviewing these documents helps prevent defects from being introduced into the code or the application. So static does not have any kind of involvement of execution of the code, or maybe execution of the application. It's just limited to static documentations which are non-executable. Where on the other side, when you talk about dynamic testing, these are the levels, or these are the things which takes place as a part of dynamic testing, involves some kind of execution, or I can say it's completely execution based, where you have certain codes or an application which runs and then you test it. Say for example, when you talk about dynamic testing, I can say that you run your test cases over the application. In turn, you try to run the application with some kind of inputs given on the application, and based on that you seek the desired output that's dependent on the requirements. So dynamic testing involves all this execution, whereas static testing does not have any kind of execution involved. So moving into the detail of that, static testing is classified further into 4 types, or the approach of conducting static testing is called as review. And we have 4 types of reviews, that's informal review, walkthrough, technical review, and inspection. Remember team, when I say the types of static testing, it means that all these 4 are different and can be conducted at any point of time, subjected what's the necessity of the particular type to be conducted. So for such small documents, we conduct only informal review. If it is a heavy weighted, or maybe going to be used by different stakeholders as a parent documentation, then we move towards more formal. So talking about informal is the least formal review process, inexpensive, whereas inspection is the most formal and helps you to conduct more documentation review, something for the project like safety critical system or something. On the other side, when we talk about dynamic testing, we have got 4 different levels here as of now to understand. We call it that levels of testing, where we know about level of testing now. That's component testing, integration testing, system testing, and acceptance testing. So the approach of basically conducting these dynamic testing is called as levels of testing, whereas when you talk about static testing, we call it as reviews. And we have certain types of reviews, we have different levels of testing. And remember team, the level of testing for dynamic is not limited to these four. So we have 100 plus levels to be conducted. It's just that these are the only functional ones which can be conducted as a part of dynamic testing. Beyond this, we do have a lot of non-functionals, but we'll be having a very next topic about the same thing in the same tutorial. So stay tuned for that. And moreover, the left side is basically also called as verification. On the right side, dynamic testing is called as validation, which we know from vModel already. So the same thing, just wanted to highlight it to you. Moving to the next thing is test types or testing of function. That's your functional testing, as at K2 again. When you talk about differentiating between the functional and non-functional testing levels or testing types, then functional basically starts with the core features of the application, where you kickstart with defining certain, core fundamental features of an application with set of requirements, what is given to you. For example, when you're talking about creation of the login page, you start with testing the username, password, the login button, the forgot password link, or maybe a sign up button if in case you are not yet registered to log in. So, when you start with such core features is what you call the functionality of an application, where without which I cannot say that this application can work, even for one user on one environment or one particular configuration of the system or something. And if you see, or if in a simple manner, we can also say that the functions are basically what the system does, what it is declared for, what it is being created for, and what it can be capable of doing. Whereas when you talk about certain levels which can be conducted as a part of functional testing, we have already learned this in previous tutorial that there are certain functional levels, and we have 4 standard functional levels as of now. We call it as unit, integration, system, and acceptance. Other than this, whatever you know is all non-functional level, and that can be anything else. So let's quickly look into the non-functionals as well. Yeah, non-functional testing is about enhancing the quality characteristics of the system. So team, once your application is functionally built, now you mean to say that your unit testing, integration testing, and system testing has been performed, where you officially declare that once system testing passes, your system is functionally ready. Functionally ready in the sense that it is performing all its core functions, or basic functionalities which are desired by the requirement. And beyond that, now whatever we look into is to enhance the existing capabilities, quality characteristics of the application, is what we call it as non-functional parameters. So non-functional parameters basically says how the system works. So the functional was talking about what it does, and here it says how it does. Now, is it going to be responding fast? Is it going to handle maybe 1,000 users at a time? Or it will be compatible with different browsers? Will it be user friendly to everyone, or to the target audience, maybe whether it will be accessible to a differently able set of people? And talk about recovery testing, scalability, load, stress. There are a number of things which can be handled as a part of non-functional. So in simple terms, I can say that the other levels, what other than unit, integration, system, and acceptance, are all non-functional, which is basically meant to define one or the other quality characteristics of an application. So when you talk about, if we have to really elaborate it, I can say that functional parameters are not the one which defines the quality. I think you are limited to the quality definition in functional levels by finding the defects and fixing them. But beyond that, the main quality or the needed quality is defined when it comes to non-functional levels, where more enhancements and more optimization is done to the existing application. Where some of the levels are mentioned here, which can be just a helpful input to you, like performance testing, stress testing, load testing, usability, maintainability testing, reliability testing, and portability. And this is not limited. It's not this is what it is, it's all. We have 100 plus levels of testing for non-functional as well. So any such parameter you can think about, we have got a level for it. For example, portability, interoperability, learnability, suitability. There's a lot of things which you can explore. But From the perspective of foundation level syllabus, we are not talking in detail about non-functionals. We are just talking about functionals where we have read all the 4 levels as of now and we have understood that. So we are not going to explore more on non-functional, but we are just trying to understand that how functional is different from non-functional testing. So I think that's the difference which we have already created. So hope that's fine with you. So here the next topic is about the testing of software structures, which is again at K2, but let me make you understand that what exactly this topic is all about. Here we are trying to understand the difference between the white box testing and the black box testing. Obviously, we have understood about, like, we have been practicing these levels for a long time. For those who are already experienced with manual testing, they must be knowing this. Whereas for those who are looking at on it as for the first time, as when you talk about white box testing and black box testing are two different approaches to conduct dynamic testing. Now, we have understood the classification of testing. So now we know what we are talking about when we say dynamic testing, and these two are different approaches to conduct dynamic testing. Now, there is a difference between these two. When you talk about white box testing, you basically don't call it as like it is a type of unit testing or unit testing is a type of white box. No. Unit integration, system, and acceptance are the 4 functional levels as a part of dynamic testing, whereas to conduct these functional levels, we have 2 different approaches. One is white box, one is black box, where the approach has a difference, and the difference is listed here. Whereas white box testing is conducted by a person who has the knowledge of backend. When we use the word backend, it basically means the code and the structure where a person can understand what is written behind the screen, behind the UI, and he has the understanding of working on it, maybe fixing those codes or something, and this person is commonly called as a developer. So the approach basically says that when he tests or she tests the application, this person will open the code, run the fragment of code, that's a program, and seek for the desired output. If the desired output is not achieved, then he will only fix the defect right there without reporting it to somebody else. But this approach slightly varies when it comes to black box. The approach here is basically done by a person who does not have any kind of understanding of what is written behind the screen. So this person will work on the front end. When we say front end, it is called as user interface, the UI of the application, and try to feed in with certain set of data values. We call it as inputs, where we can try with valid and invalid inputs, and based on the requirements, we try to seek the actual execution output. If your expected matches with the actual, you say it is passed, but if it is fail, you basically report it as a defect to the person who knows the backend, that's developer. So generally, a tester practicing black box testing will report the defects to the developer, and developer will fix it up and send it back to you. And this person is commonly called as a tester, or the role profile is called as a tester. So that's basically the very common difference between the white box and black box, where this gentleman is known as developer, and this side, the team conducting the black box testing, can be called as test engineer or tester. And there are also a lot of synonyms what ISTQB prefers to add to the syllabus, and here are some of them. Also known as white box is also called as structure box testing, glass box testing, open box testing, clear box testing, transparent box testing. Where if you see all these terms basically means one thing, including the term white, that is, I can see through what's inside. So if you can see through something inside, what is the back end, that is what you call it as white box testing. So all these terms will mean same, that I know what's inside, what is going, what's happening there. I can work with it, I can deal with it, I can fix this. Whereas when you talk about black box, it's also called as skin box, closed box, opaque box. So where all these terms basically mean that I cannot see what's inside, or what is basically you cannot see through. So practically working with an application, you work on the user end, where it is user interface. You don't know what is written behind it and how exactly this field is working, and when you enter a valid input, it is accepted. When you enter invalid input, it is rejected. So that does create a difference between these two things and the parameters. So today, I hope we have understood the very much difference between the white box testing and black box testing, and these are basically two different approaches to conduct the dynamic testing. We did have something called as gray box, but it is no longer practiced and not also a part of ISTQB syllabus. Whereas gray box was considered as a single person behaving as a developer cum tester. So he used to conduct both the approaches as a blended approach together. So anyways, that's not in the curriculum anymore, so you can very well skip it. Last but not the least, coming to the last topic of this segment, that's test types, we have got retesting and regression testing. So when you talk about retesting and regression testing, the story starts the moment your test fails. As soon as your test fails, the very first step what you do is you report a defect to your management, stating that one of my test cases have failed, and I would looking forward for your contribution on intervention where you can look into that, and your manager comes into picture and so on. We don't want to talk about DTLC as of now, but I'm just giving you a brief outline because we'll be discussing about defect tracking in more detail when we come to chapter 5. So the defect is being reported to the developer. Developer, analyzes it, finds the root cause, and fixes the defect and send it back to you. As soon as the defect comes to you back, once the declared statement from the developer which says that the defect has been resolved. Obviously, the only way you can make sure that the defect has been resolved or not is by conducting or executing the same test case which revealed the problem. So you rerun the same test case to just make sure that it passes this time and the defect has been resolved. And that approach or that particular execution by which you rerun the same test case just to make sure that the defect has been resolved or not is called as retesting. Whereas retesting by ISTQB is also called as confirmation testing, where it's quite easy to understand that it is basically a test which is executed again to confirm the fix. So we call it as confirmation testing as well. Whereas on the other side, we do have another term called as regression. So let's talk about this story again, where the developer has made some changes to fix this defect. Now he must have modified the existing code, he must have written a new piece of code to fix the defect, or he must have or she must have deleted certain piece of code to fix that defect. Now in either of these cases where the developer would have modified it, created a new piece of code, or maybe deleted an existing code, it is a possibility that it might impact the part of the same module which were working fine earlier. So it's like when you talk about when your cell phone was not working fine earlier, and one day you visit your service center and say that my songs are getting played but I cannot listen to the audio through the speakers. So the service center guy basically kept your phone, he opened the hardware and fixed some of the components to make speaker play the audio again. And when you go back, obviously you first conduct retesting, but as he opened your cell phone to fix it, where he would have touched n number of components, you never know about it, what he has done. You do check with making a call also, other than playing the song. You make a call, you take a picture, you check with your camera, check with your the libraries, the files which were connected, the Bluetooth device, the signal strength, the network availability, the SIM card readability. So the only thing what we understand from here is like when we open certain thing and try to make changes into that, it is possibility is that when a new piece of code is being modified or added to the system, it may impact the existing code, because we do have certain consideration on the compatibility point of view, where we say that not everything comes with a compatibility, where it can be humans, it can be code, it can be programs, anything. So considering those parameters and such probabilities, we do conduct regression testing, where we rerun those test cases which were passed earlier once again, just to make sure that these test cases are still passing. Just because the defect has been fixed, it does not mean that the previous test cases which are executed and very well passed now fails, because if now it fails, it is basically the result of the fix which is done, and it may impact the unchanged part of the module. So it's all about repeating the certain set of test cases to basically check for any kind of adverse effect due to the change part on the unchanged part of the module. Now, regression testings are basically very good candidates for automation, because the primary objective is not to find defect, just to make sure that everything is still intact and working fine. So anywhere if you come across when you say that when can I opt to go for automation, when the approach or scenario does not have a primary objective of finding defects. We do find defects, but maybe as a secondary approach. But the primary objective is not to find the defects, so you can automate it. So regression is one of them, and it's a good candidate for automation. The only reason is the regression testing is not about just making sure that we are running it to find defects. We have already executed those test cases, but now we are rerunning it just to make sure that everything is still working fine. Now, when you talk about regression, it is not limited to when a defect is fixed. Regressions are even executed when you talk about any such changes which takes place on a live application as well. For example, if you have released an application and it's been live for a long time as of now, and suddenly you try to move it from Windows 7 to Windows 8. Now, when you change the operating system, you may change the platform, and based on that, we do conduct regression testing, because when it was released earlier, it was conducted, or all the entire testing was conducted on one particular platform, one particular environment, which we call it as test environment. And this environment now changes, then obviously we need to rerun those test cases which are as a part of your testing, to just make sure that everything is still working fine on the new platform. Beyond that, regression testing can also be conducted every time when you introduce a new piece of feature, new piece of code to an existing live application. We do call it as enhancements, or adding updates to an existing application. So we do a lot of regression in those cases, because it becomes a mandatory step for everyone to make sure that the new piece of code is not having any impact on the existing application where people are already using it. So that's one of the thing. Anyways, in the next upcoming topic of the same chapter, and being the last topic of this chapter, we'll be talking more on the regression testing and understanding what is maintenance testing. So this is all for today. This is all about this topic. Hope you have understood the content discussed here in the 3 segments, and it was clear to you. In case you still have any queries, you are always free to comment below, and I'll be happy to get back to you with the more details or justification on the statement or the question asked. I hope this was quite interesting video for you, and you have learned something new today. Beyond that, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon for latest notifications about the topic. Stay tuned for more tutorials, upcoming chapters on the same series. Till then, take care and stay updated with all the updates of the testing. Take care. Happy learning.